Wow, this one was in the oven for a long time. After a bit of a gap since my Kingdom Hearts 2 review, it's finally time for me to tackle Birth by Sleep. Unlike the previous entries, I didn't play this or any of the following games until the all-in-one bundle, so I'm entering uncharted territory, and my thoughts from my youth are no longer a factor. Not that I think they had a huge effect on my previous reviews, but, you know. This also means that I don't really have much knowledge on the PSP version for comparison, so if I bring it up, I'll be referencing some accomplices, some partners in crime, some acquaintances' thoughts on the changes. And before we jump into it, I'm gonna give a warning here. While I'm not gonna cover the entirety of the story, be forewarned that I am absolutely gonna spoil the hell out of the game's plot. So if you're interested in playing the real deal and don't want to know what's coming beforehand, you may want to go do that before watching this. For the rest of you, it's time to find out if Birth by Sleep is worth the hype. So as soon as we start, we're met with the game's CGI opening credits to the tune of Simple and Clean. Yeah, unfortunately this is yet another use of the theme. Don't get me wrong, this song is great, but it left me wishing there was a new track or at least a new version of the theme. Fortunately, the opening is awesome, even if it's made up from the secret ending of Kingdom Hearts 2. Birth by Sleep is actually a prequel to the series. The story begins with, "Oh no, not this asshole again! Get lost, Roxas! Nobody wants another 2-hour prologue!" Actually, this kid is Ventus, and the reason why he looks like Roxas, or rather the other way around, is explained much later in the plot. We begin the tutorial with him, and wow, it took him all of 5 seconds to be self-motivated after the foreboding opening stuff. Imagine that, having a character who actually does more than sit on his ass and complain to open the game with. After some brief movement and combat basics, the game introduces you to Aqua and Terra, whom you switch between for the rest of this tutorial prologue, which is only a few minutes long. Even with the cutscenes, this is probably the shortest opening chapter to a Kingdom Hearts game, and that's not a bad thing. From here, you choose which of the 3 characters you'll follow for the rest of the plot. Yeah, in an interesting change of pace, the game is split across 3 main heroes, each with their own stories, bosses, and routes. While each of the worlds is shared between the 3, they all play differently, with varying types of combat, and sometimes have access to areas the others don't. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but before you show concern that this drags out the game, rest assured, it doesn't. I'm going to remark on the characters in the order I played them in, which is what most people consider to be the best order for the sake of the plot. Speaking of which, a lot of people claim the 3 of them never act like real friends because we don't see them interact much, but I don't fully agree. It's not perfect, but they show they care about each other and are constantly wondering what the others are doing. Yeah, a bit more showing of them in downtime would have been nice, don't get me wrong. But remember how Riku was kind of a prick in the first Kingdom Hearts? Like, really, this guy was Sora's best friend? Are you sure? No complaints about Kairi and Sora's friendship, mind you. I thought they felt pretty natural. And before you pelt me with messages, I do get the feeling Riku is his friend in Chain of Memories in Kingdom Hearts 2. I'm aware much of Kingdom Hearts 1 was about how he was giving into darkness. And don't get me started on Roxas, since I already bitched about him through half the previous review. As much as I'll talk about Terra being a dumbass, he still bounces off his friends fairly believably. Yeah, he's not particularly bright and can't seem to comprehend what the darkness is, but he tells Ventus that when he's needed, he'll always come to help. Ventus looks up to him. Aqua trusts him, but is concerned about him walking down a dark path, but even starts to understand that there's a balance between darkness and light. Aqua just wants to protect her friends. Ventus wants to stand with her, but keeps getting told to go home because she's scared of him getting hurt. I think the thing that hurts these characters the most is actually what their ages seem to be. Terra seems a bit too dippy for somebody around 20, and Ventus acts like he should be 12 instead of 16. Speaking of which, Aqua acts pretty responsibly, even though she's still probably a minor. So about the characters individually, and the recommended story order. First is Terra. He's basically the muscle of the group, with slow, powerful Keyblade swings and having access to some more notable physical attacks and a few dark skills. Because he's heavier, he also is less skilled at dodging, so he's probably the toughest of the 3 to play as. Second is our plucky not Roxas. Ventus isn't particularly powerful, and he's only average with magic, but this little boy is fast. He's probably the most similar to Sora in terms of how he plays, although I occasionally found myself stuck with him doing chip damage to enemies, though strangely not bosses, in some of the later areas. And then there's Aqua, who is magic destruction incarnate, and has a broken ass block and dodge. Of the three, she's easily the most fun to play as, and has tons of amazing magic skills to mess with. And, how can I put this delicately? She has breast physics. Don't ask me why, but hey, I'm also not complaining. I mean, just look at her. From here on, you play out the story through the chosen character, starting from Aqua and Terra's Keyblade Mastery Test, which goes haywire because of an obvious villain. This is Xehanort. He's obviously evil. He's also voiced by the late great Leonard Nimoy.
And I know why. It is because he fears you. Join me.
Also, the other guy is Ericus. He's voiced by Mark Hamill.
Why do all my attempts to reach you fail?
Yes, it's a Star Trek meets Star Wars fanfiction crossover. You may now have your nerdgasm. Done? Okay, let's continue. Actually, I'm just gonna note the voice acting real quick. Most of it's fantastic. Obviously, Nort and Nerd here are wonderful picks, along with Ventus, who shares his voice actor, Jesse McCartney, with Roxas. But here, he gets to do more than mope and gives off a fantastic range of emotions.
My friends are my power, and I'm theirs!
Also, this spoopy boy here in dark Riku armor is Vanitas. He's probably the biggest jerk-ass in this series, and he shares a voice actor with Sora. And let me tell ya, old babyface Haley Joel Osment is clearly having the time of his life hamming it up as a total dick.
Just like I've outgrown my need for you.
Unfortunately, Terra and Aqua are not quite so fortunate. Despite playing Best Girl, Willa Holland sounds very dull at times.
Terra, you better stay strong for me.
There's moments where the performance sounds fine, but I won't deny there's plenty of flat-sounding line reads, which is a shame as her voice is really well chosen, but her delivery just doesn't often land. Jason Doring? I don't know how to pronounce that, has a bit more luck in his attempt, but also sounds fairly deadpan at times.
I can never return home now. I'm a failure.
It's not the worst.
Wow, I really can't move my body.
But it won't do any good to pretend like the performances don't have problems. Anyway, back in the story, Nort does his dark magic and makes Terra fail his test because my darkness, after slapping some balls around. This leads to the trio going in separate directions, with Xehanort manipulating Terra, Ventus giving chase after him, and Aqua being sent to keep Terra from becoming evil, while sending Ventus home because it's past his bedtime. I'm mostly going to focus on Aqua as I replayed her story for this review because I was having way too much fun, but I'll also touch upon the others. I also replayed her story because I wanted to do this review right, unlike that nincompoop that reviewed Kingdom Hearts 2 and made a total noob mistake by calling the Dusk enemies husks. And we'll start with a bit of Terra. Terra is... how can I put this politely? Terra is a dumb bitch. He is so easily manipulated that it's actually kind of funny in an embarrassing way. See that innocent girl? Steal her heart! Okay, thanks, bye. Much of his story involves being really easily led by evil people, regretting it, and then doing something else that's stupid, with the obviously evil Xehanort being the most frequent instance of this. Ventus, on the other hand, is simply chasing after Terra and trying to make friends along the way, which includes Lee, the guy who eventually becomes the nobody, Axel, for a fun cameo. His plot involves getting dragged into the attempted creation of a special Keyblade named the...
Keyblade!
Okay, that name pun is really dorky, so anytime I mention it from now on, I'm just gonna call it the X-Blade so I don't confuse myself. Anyway, the whole thing going on here is Xehanort is trying to sync Ventus and Vanitas to create this X-Blade and do evil stuff evilly. Aqua's job is to be the group mom.
You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
Tiger Mom is angry?
Tiger Mom is disappointed.
I'm sorry, Tiger Mom.
She's supposed to clean up Terra's mess and bring Ventus home. Amusingly, despite being pushed as basically the poster child of the game, Aqua probably has the least involvement in the plot until you get to the end of the story. She mostly serves as an observer to the aftermaths of the other characters' events. Occasionally, the stories may also intersect with each other, which helps give off the feeling that these stories are all going on at the same time, and makes so replaying these same worlds feels less fatigued than the revisits in Kingdom Hearts 2. But you guys probably want to know how the game actually plays, don't you? It's, familiar yet different, if that makes any sense. The game follows a pretty standard progression flow. You have your tutorial/prologue, your introductory world, a couple more worlds to explore in a set, a midpoint plot twist, a few more worlds, another plot twist, and a final dungeon. This rings pretty much true for all three characters' storylines. Unlike the numbered entries, there's no gummy ship minigame. It just tosses you into the world once you select your destination. Occasionally, there might be a quick gimmick fight or something, but most of it is pretty straightforward. The combat is much slower and less flashy than Kingdom Hearts 2. Instead of being filled with acrobatic, stylized flailing, your combos are much more condensed and deliberate. When you swing your weapon, you're committed to your action, so if you miss, you're left wide open, and you're not going to have a good time if you just try to slap everything with your keyblade. And I kinda prefer it that way. Don't get me wrong, I like smacking things around as much as the next guy, but after a while, Kingdom Hearts 2 started to lose me because slapping things was just generally the path of least resistance. Each character also fights a little bit differently, as mentioned before, with Terra being slow and powerful, Ventus being speedy and recovering quickly, and Aqua's middling longer reach blows. The basic moves are also all there beyond that. Guarding for deflecting most attacks, which can later gain a counterattack ability. There's also a dodge maneuver to evade and avoid all sorts of harm. And I'll just be blunt. Aqua dwarfs the other two by far. Her cartwheel dodge makes her pretty much invulnerable to all attacks as long as you keep spamming it, and her block protects her from every direction. Beyond that, you can also gain the ability to glide, air dash, and double jump depending on the character. There's also new functions like the D-Link, where you sync your character up to another character, granting you access to a few of their skills and fully restoring your HP. This can be helpful in a few situations, but I won't lie, I pretty much forgot it existed after using it on Terra's first boss to heal. And of course, there's the Shot Lock. This switches you to a first-person aiming system where you target enemies and can unleash a barrage of attacks on a foe, which, when active, grants you a crap ton of invincibility frames. And then there's the command deck. Instead of having MP or having the doofy card system from Chain of Memories, Birth by Sleep introduces a system where you equip a few skills with their own recharge rate. These equips cover everything: physical attacks that aren't your standard melee combos, support abilities like Cure, attack magics, and even consumable items. After most worlds, you gain another command deck slot and can add more to your repertoire. This allows you to customize your loadout to a pretty in-depth degree. You cycle through your commands and can activate them with triangle. Now you might think this means instead of mashing X and triangle, you're mashing X and triangle. To some degree, you'd not be wrong for thinking that, except your skills all have a cooldown rate, and the more powerful they are, the longer they typically take to recharge. There's also some that have a follow-up attack that requires another button press, which may be a different button than the activation one. Shotlocks also do this, which helps keep you on your toes. On top of this, your commands all have levels. As you get more powerful, they level up alongside you, but max out quickly. And this is the best part. You might think that's a weird thing for me to say, but your skills don't actually seem to gain power as they level up. Instead, a leveled up skill can be combined with another skill, allowing you to meld them into more powerful techniques. Some of these are obvious, like combining two fire spells can turn into a Fire, for instance. And now you're thinking, doesn't that mean you could have a Fire Aga really early on in the game? Again, you're not wrong for thinking that, because you totally can. But there's more than just melding skills for more power. Instead, your passive abilities are tied to your skills. When melding, you can add crystals to your fusions, allowing you to gain more meaningful power-ups. This means you can make your fire spells more powerful, have your command deck recharge faster, or even get those wonderful crucial skills like Once More and Second Chance. Once you max out an equipped command, its passive ability is permanently learned. And yes, this means you can be absurdly powerful in a very short amount of time. Admittedly, some of the more potent abilities are locked behind recipes that you have to unlock from exploration or progress, but in general, you can get powerful in a short amount of time. To top all this off, your skills all fill up a gauge that when full activates command styles. These are often influenced by the moves you're currently using in battle, and each one feels unique. This is the closest the game gets to the flashier, more over-the-top style of Kingdom Hearts 2, and for the most part, these are really cool. Because they so often reflect your playstyle, you can wind up seeing some absolutely amazing moves that just feel right. Once activated, a second meter opens up for your command style, and when filled, allows you to unleash a devastating, stylized finishing blow. This does have a bit of a downside, admittedly. When it activates or the meter runs out, there's a sort of delay that occurs and can stop your attacks dead. This can also happen following your finishing strike, though that one isn't usually quite as bad. My personal recommendation is to play through the game at least once without looking at melding unlocks, so you don't break the game too early. Despite how disproportionate the balance can be, I legitimately loved the combat. I always felt engaged, and I was punished for doing something stupid, and my goodness am I a sucker for the skill system. It was always gratifying to power up my capabilities, and that I was the one in control of my own growth. It was immensely pleasing. Learning to swap between my skills and knowing when to use a physical strike kept the gameplay from getting too monotonous, and knowing when to let an enemy strike so I could put up my block and deflect them always put a grin on my face. Birth by Sleep's campaigns are short. Each one only lasts around 6 to 10 hours, which means the whole game is pretty reasonably lengthed. There's not a lot of fat on this game, and it doesn't drag its ass, but it's also not anemic in content. It's just the game is spread across 3 adventures, so it feels more bite-sized, especially due to the worlds. Ah yes, the worlds. We actually have a pretty great selection here. Almost all of them are new, and the ones that aren't typically have something to them that we haven't seen before. The new ones this time around are Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Lilo and Stitch, along with Olympus Coliseum, where you get to see a little more than just the Coliseum, Neverland, except this time you actually get to go into Neverland itself, Disney Town instead of the castle, and Radiant Garden before it got overrun. There's also the game's final world, the Keyblade Graveyard, a few small places you visit but aren't really full worlds, and the Mirage Arena. Unfortunately, they do have a bit of a problem. They suffer from a pretty similar issue that Kingdom Hearts 2 had. The worlds are pretty flat and lacking in stuff like platforming. There's not a whole lot to them, and they're fairly empty, with the exception of Radiant Garden, which is a decent size for a Kingdom Hearts world. It even has a little bit of platforming. There's bits and pieces here and there within the worlds that help flush them out, but for the most part, they're really not much more interesting than Kingdom Hearts 2's worlds. However, the big difference here is that Birth by Sleep was made for the much less powerful handheld instead of the PS2. So, I do have some forgiveness toward it in that respect. Speaking of hardware, good lord, this game is beautiful. Admittedly, this is a remaster running on vastly more powerful hardware, but it looks and runs great, even if the environments are still sparse. The cutscenes are honestly fantastic, and sometimes have more going on in them than the console titles, which is just mind-blowing. I can't help but wonder how much of this was in-game engine, and how much was pre-rendered in the original version, if any. Despite being on the less powerful PSP, the presentation really didn't take any major downgrades. As for story integration, it's still not as good as the first Kingdom Hearts, but it actually serves the individual characters unlike Kingdom Hearts 2. While most of it is basically retellings of the Disney movies, many of these moments serve to develop the main cast. Moments like Aqua being horrified by Terra seemingly doing heinous things, Terra being a dumb bitch and actually doing those heinous things, and Ventus becoming the size of a mouse. Okay, so not all of them serve the characters, but there's just quite a bit that does tie together, and it helps flesh out the heroes. To keep things a little fresh, there's also a few mini-games. These mostly pop up in Disney Town with a few exceptions, and they're all pretty different. Sadly, some of these are required to progress, and I'm not entirely sure why. Each character has at least one required one, but can partake in the others. The ones in Disney Town are a fairly entertaining kart racer that's a fun distraction, but isn't gonna replace anyone's copy of Mario Kart anytime soon. A rhythm game where you make ice cream, which for some reason I never got footage of because I'm a lazy jackass and isn't too bad once you understand what you're doing. And volleyball with fruit, which is probably by far the most annoying. Seriously, this one gives me problems, and I'm not sure why I can't get the hang of it. Beyond that, there's a few moments where you'll fight a brief battle in space or some such thing while on your fancy space armor. These are nothing special and only take a moment for the most part. There's also a couple different tournaments. The first happens when you go to Olympus Coliseum and are basically just kill the crowd in the time limit type thing, and finish off with an obligatory boss battle. Admittedly, the time limit ones seem to come down to your skills. Set the wrong ones and you can easily fail. The others are found in the Mirage Arena and are more like the ones from the mainline games. They're generally just smack the enemy around, but occasionally have some kind of extra side mission for extra points. Speaking of the Mirage Arena, this got a massive alteration in the remaster. Apparently it's been made much easier as compensation for a removed feature. And that feature was multiplayer. You know, that thing that was okay on the PSP, but probably would have thrived on the PS3 and PS4. I'm not sure why they dropped it in the remaster, especially since it still leans toward the idea that the Mirage Arena was made for multiplayer. This also carries over into the last minigame, which actually has a little bit more weight to it in the main game. The final minigame is the command board, where you play a Monopoly-esque board game with the cast and try to unlock and level up skills. There is no cost to playing this except time, and can be used as an alternative to grinding to level up your abilities. It's pretty simple. Roll the digital dice, collect spaces by placing your commands on them, and spending GP, a currency that only exists in this mode and is reset every time you start a new command board game. And try to outmatch the AI or other players if you've got a buddy with another PSP. The overall goal is to hit a certain total GP amount and reach the starting point. This is most easily done by running around and hitting the colored spaces that give a GP bonus, and when all four are hit and you return to the start, you get a massive bonus. There's various traps with different effects and other characters can mess with you, but you can also spend ability cards, which are restorable, to give yourself an advantage. Let your current GP drop too low and you have to sell and own space to continue. Not sure what happens if you go completely bankrupt, since that never happened to me, thankfully. Weirdly enough, the command board can be played at the Mirage Arena to get points there, which allows you to level up your rank in that, thus unlocking various new things. With the lack of the multiplayer mode in the remaster, I can't help but wonder why they don't just give you the points you'd otherwise gain there, but maybe that's just me. Anyway, these are all just minor diversions, and while some of them, particularly the command board, are helpful, it's not something you have to put too much focus on. Certainly none of them are as intrusive as the interruptions previous games gave. Looking at you, stupid Tron Light Cycle. The game also takes a note from Chain of Memories. Yeah, I know that's a red flag, but before you raise the alarms, it's simply that you run most of the game solo. Instead of running around with a couple buddies, most of the adventure follows your chosen hero on their own, save for a few events. On occasion, you may be teamed up with the other two protagonists, Mickey, or even a normal Disney character. They are not particularly useful fighters, but it does help keep things interesting, especially since outside of the other heroes, you usually gain access to some kind of special skill or environmental action while paired up. This can be something as simple as chucking Stitch at a boss, which is exactly as funny as you think it is, to having your teammate hoist you up on a castle wall. Sometimes you'll get a team ability to dodge or counter a boss attack, and it adds some charm to the game. Now you might be thinking, but didn't you hate the reaction commands in Kingdom Hearts 2? Isn't this somewhat the same thing? Well, in all fairness, you're not entirely wrong. I think what sets these apart is that they usually feel a bit more natural instead of, here's a fancy cutscene that exists just for the sake of flash. It also probably doesn't hurt that these are something that only appear in a select few cases, so it feels special when you do see them. There's also a few escort missions. Stop that! Okay, yeah, in just about every game ever, escort missions are a death knell for fun. There's so many times where that kind of thing pops up and you just start to think, oh no, not this shit again, and with good reason. Escort missions and defense missions tend to suck ass. But, surprisingly, these are some of the least offensive escort missions I've ever seen. Your dimwit charge usually can take a decent amount of hits, and there's lots of AoE attacks that can help make it easier for you. And the thing that really sells it? When in danger, you get a prompt to hit square and instantly warp to their side to protect them. It's not perfect, it's an escort mission after all, but man, such a simple thing makes them considerably less frustrating. These escorts are also typically fairly short, so it's a lot less aggravating than in some games. As I stated before, each character has their own way of going through the story and faces their own bosses, and this shines most during the final bosses. Terra takes on Vanitas and Xehanort at the same time, then takes on Nort by himself, and finally faces off against himself. It makes sense in context, I swear. Ventus fights Vanitas a couple times, including a pretty epic sequence where he D-links with his foe, and Aqua finishes the adventure by fighting Xigbar, Break, and an X-Blade wielding Vanitas alongside Mickey, which automatically makes her final fight the coolest. But even then, the story still has more to offer. You see, Terra winds up giving into his darkness to fight Xehanort, and this was exactly what Nort was pushing for. He wanted to steal Terra's body and apparently needed him to get all darkness to do so. This results in Terra's lingering will fighting Terranort and sitting there until it's time for him to wreck Sora's shit. Meanwhile, Vanitas begins to take over Ventus' heart and forms the X-Blade, so while he's fighting Aqua on the outside, an inner war wages within Ventus, and he destroys his own heart to destroy Vanitas and stop the X-Blade from being used, turning him basically into a vegetable for the second time in his life. Oh, yeah, he used to be kind of a vegetable because of experiments Xehanort performed on him. While he was a vegetable, his heart eventually found its way to a newborn Sora's heart and took up residence there until it healed. If you finished all 3 stories and found all of the Xehanort reports, this unlocks a Sonic Adventure-esque last episode. Following all of these shenanigans, Aqua winds up taking the now empty Ventus inside the Land of Departure, where the game began, and leaves him there to rest until he can recover his heart again. She takes Erika's Keyblade and heads off to find Terra. Oh, right, Ericus gets killed by Nord after being defeated by Dumb Bitch when he tries to kill Ventus to prevent the birthing of the X-Blade. Yeah, it turns out that not only is Terra a dumb bitch, but his mentor is too, making you wonder how Ventus and Aqua can even have half a brain cell between them. Eventually, a fight breaks out because Terranort isn't very nice, obviously, and the two are dragged into the world of darkness. And because she's such a nice person, she makes the tremendously stupid mistake of sending Terranort back to Radiant Garden using her Keyblade armor, leaving her wandering the darkness on her own for years. Also, Ventus' heart goes back and rents an apartment in Sora's. And if you have the remastered Final Mix version of the game, there's still more! If you finish the game under even more specific conditions, you unlock another short campaign for Aqua that details some of her adventures in the world of darkness that somewhat sets up Kingdom Hearts 3. Yeah, this game actually ends on a bittersweet, grim note. The heroes may have temporarily stopped Xehanort's scheme, but only for a while. One is in a vegetative state, one has lost control of his body, and the last is wandering eternal darkness for the next decade.
Dark.
And even after 3 main campaigns, 2 mini-campaigns, and the Mirage Arena, there's still more to do. This game has quite a few collectibles, such as stickers and the like, similar to Kingdom Hearts 2, and, of course, some extra bosses. I was only able to fight one of these extra bosses as I haven't unlocked the rest, and he, well... Actually, that's not an uncommon thing to see in Birth by Sleep. Death! While you can certainly break the game if you choose to play it normally, it's not uncommon for a few fights to really smack your shit in. Admittedly, some of this is due to questionable design. Human bosses don't stagger as consistently as they used to. You're not gonna slap them with 3 20-hit combos in a row like you could in Kingdom Hearts 2, which I'm perfectly okay with, but sometimes they won't stagger at all, or they'll slap you mid-combo, which does cause some frustration. I'll admit, fighting Ericus as Terra got on my nerves a few times, though that was mostly due to being cornered by his fire pillars, rather than him not being stunned easily. By contrast, I loved every fight with Vanitas, save for maybe the final showdown between him and Ventus. Not that it wasn't fun, but there seems to be a glitch, which I sadly don't have footage of, where Ventus' last word's finishing move wouldn't land unless Vanitas was attacking me, which caused me a couple deaths. From what I can tell, this is only in the PS4 version and doesn't exist in the PSP or PS3 versions, but I don't have proof nor even footage of the bug, so take that as you will. But despite being able to leap out of your combos, man, Vanitas was just such a thrill to fight. He always kept me on my toes and made me make sure to not get greedy with my attacks. So obviously, there's quite a bit of content packed into this game, and I've mostly been positive towards it. Is there anything I don't particularly enjoy about the game? Well, the soundtrack isn't as good as the other games. I mean, it's not bad, even if hearing bippity boppity boo repeatedly drove me insane in the menus, but I don't really find myself humming much from the game like I do the first two games, and it doesn't have that charm like the GBA version of Chain of Memories renditions did. So, do I recommend this game? Hell yeah, I do! I'm just gonna be as blunt as I can. For all the flaws this title has, I found it immensely compelling. I loved the characters, I loved the story, and I loved the gameplay. The worst aspects at most miffed me, and the best aspects were a blast. I get it, some of the fights can be a mess, and the combat can be broken pretty easily, but just playing it normally was one of the most satisfying experiences I've had with the series. I didn't even come close to touching on all the story beats either. The game actually does a pretty solid job of setting up the later stories. You get to see how Riku and Sora were capable of inheriting a Keyblade. You see sorta how Kairi was kept safe and was able to traverse to Destiny Islands, how Pete became Maleficent's crony, etc. It has a few issues, but in general, it works. It answers some questions nobody asked, but also doesn't feel particularly intrusive. Certainly nothing nearly as ridiculous as some of the crud Kingdom Hearts 2 retconned. I personally recommend going for the PS4 version, as the remaster has a silky smooth 60 frames per second performance, lightning fast load times, and a bit more content, even if it may have a few extra bugs. Supposedly, it also made the infamous mysterious figure bonus fight a little less frustrating. The PSP version has a wonkier camera system, occasional slowdown, and suffered from some lengthy load times if you didn't data install. On the plus side, if you have a friend who also has the game on PSP, you can play the local co-op, which I'm told was pretty nifty. I'd like to say any version is fantastic, but since my knowledge of the PSP version comes from a few friends, and I don't really have a frame of reference on the PS3 version, I can't really say for sure. Still, I'm sure any of them are basically fine and can't imagine much was changed aside from the camera, thanks to the second analog stick. Still, I'm really glad I wound up enjoying this entry as much as I did. Having played the previous titles in the past, stepping into new territory for this game was a breath of fresh air, and I really dig the command deck and the various other systems, even if it's less than perfect. In the end, I found it to be a compelling, fun adventure, and I legitimately hope that if any of you give it a shot, you wind up feeling the same way. But damn, man, I don't really do the whole waifu thing, but that has got to be a waifu! Thank you guys so much for watching, and sorry this video has taken so damn long. I really did have a blast playing this game again and making this review. I just got super duper lazy like I usually do. Anyway, agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. Also, a quick shout out to my helpful sources of info with the PSP version of the game. Storm, Tom, and Goku, your information was much appreciated. And if you want to see more insanity, you can check out more Kingdom Hearts reviews. Or if you want to see what took so long, why not check out me trying to pitch a Devil May Cry spin-off.